Hi guys and girls, welcome to the first What is Universe podcast. I hope one of many. An essential part of any publication nowadays is to have that level of discussion. And it's a direct product of the fact that we've seen a good spike in the traffic online and in people talking about general, I suppose, points of discussion. But the common point that seems to be getting people the most excited isn't the pure science fact, isn't the pure astronomical or astrophysical or space technological stuff, but actually the overlap with science fiction and fantasy. And I suppose the bridge between all of this being pseudoscience, whereby you, as I understand it anyway, you take a little bit of science fact and you elongate that or you exaggerate it into a fantasy realm, which creates a universe of its own for purely entertainment or creative purposes, but then ultimately pays something back in the sense that people watching that get curious, they get entertained, and because of that, they might themselves venture back into the discipline of hardcore proper science fact, so that there is this marriage of convenience, if you like, between what would otherwise be quite disparate places to go. And thank you to all of the posters this week. But as I say, it's fascinating to see that the ones that are really getting people interested are the fictional ones, the spiritual ones, the things that seem to spin off. So that's going to be our theme for today. I'm James Murphy. I'm the editor of the magazine and the community manager. With me is our CEO at Crocotta Research and Development and the founder proprietor of the magazine, Robert Sugar. Hello, Robert. How are you?
Hey there. I'm Robert.
Okay, Robert, give us your potted definition of pseudoscience. What is it?
It's less simple to define, really. It's kind of a bridge, a dangerous bridge between, science and the world of just fantasy and fiction. Sometimes it's entertaining, sometimes it even contains lots of real science elements and can be an example or inspiration for kids or actually anybody. But then sometimes it just it turns into something more harmful when people try to justify certain fictional ideas with real science, and then these two things get mixed just too much, and that's something I don't like either, actually. Mm-hmm. But basically, fiction is good because that gives us dreams and hopes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm going to give you three fictional franchises that use science but are not, they're not by any means science fact, but there's some glimmer of not so much fact, but certainly truth to the science with which they play. We're going to start with the great Tony Stark from Iron Man. And he's played by Robert Downey Jr., as many or most of you will know. Stark is a Marvel Comics character who's recently been given life on the screen by Downey Jr. He's given it a charismatic, very likable, very engaging incarnation. And it started with 2008's Iron Man movie, which in turn launched what we call the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it was such a success. So Marvel Comics became a film production outfit. Rather than having to depend on the big distributors to make deals with, they can make their own movies and sell to whomever they wish on their own terms. What's interesting about the Iron Man movies, there are 3 Iron Man movies and then these spun off into these Avengers where he teams up with other superheroes, is yes, okay, you get hardcore science fiction, stuff that's not going to happen. If it happens tomorrow and I'm wrong, I'm really not going to be too bothered about it. But it has things like, invasions by alien gods, and it has, big green men and that sort of thing. And it has an element, I suppose, of magic or downright fantasy as opposed to even science fiction, let alone pseudoscience. But what's interesting about it, aside from Downey's charisma, and aside from the lovely Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, on whom I have a ginormous crush that is well documented and will defend her at all costs, is the what I call the augmented, or what you call augmented reality. The idea that we see him build things. Now, the things that he builds, okay, that's science fiction. But the way that he builds them, they appear to have a very logical engineering process to them. And the technology that he's using simply seems to be a minor exaggeration of what we have available now. So my question, Robert, is how far away am I from having a Tony Stark style workstation where I'm able to move items three-dimensionally, visually, my hands interacting with the computer screen, and that sort of, I suppose, kinesthetic engagement with technology?
Well, your fingers can interact with the screen even now, actually, when you use your smartphone. But what Tony Stark is really doing is, basically projecting all these fancy things from the two-dimensional flat screen to the 3D space, which would be still doable, to be honest. The only problem is, I see right now, is how to visualize, how to project it, because there are no holographic projectors except in movies. Augmented reality to mix, glass or whatever helmet screen you're wearing. Yeah, that's a possibility. But in the movie, actually, Tony Stark wasn't wearing anything like that.
And that's where the science fact becomes science fiction. That's the pseudoscience, if you like. That's where...
So projection-wise, science and technology is not there yet. The only thing I know about this is an experiment in Japan where it looks like scientists managed to build a real holo projector using light. But it's a lot limited than what Tony Stark had in the movie. It can project a few points, some simple text, but actually anywhere in 3D, in even up in the sky. Mm-hmm. But the main goal actually of that project was to create a tsunami alarm system.
Right.
And not any fancy entertainment. Right.
So it's not an aesthetic thing. It's function rather than fashion.
Well, according to the video and the documentation the Japanese scientists have, it's a working thing.
Yeah.
That could be a start of a future generation of holographic displays.
Yeah.
In general terms,
it remains in the realm of science fiction.
Technology is not there yet, I think.
So I think really it's an aesthetic thing. It's a production design tool. By having it that slight exaggeration, it instantly says, right, this is a character who is in the realms of the possible but not the probable, and it's 5 minutes into the future. Now that 5 minutes into the future thing was actually the ethos that defined our next franchise of the day, which is James Bond. Albert R. Broccoli, who produced the Bond movies for the majority of their screen life from 1962 until I think his death in 1996, and subsequently taken over by his lovely daughter Barbara, who supports young filmmakers everywhere. They're a wonderful family. But their vision has always been that Bond should be 5 minutes into the future. So James Bond is not science fiction. He's never going to go, or at least I hope he doesn't, into the sort of Tony Stark realm of gods and aliens and whatnot, but occasionally there'll be a spike in I suppose the fashion that they're dealing with. So there have been certain Bond movies that have gone into the realm of science fiction insofar as the technology that's at his disposal either doesn't exist or probably can't exist. I don't know what your memories of James Bond are. You a James Bond fan, Robert, at all? Or?
Yeah, I've always been a James Bond fan.
Well, you're a guy. Of course you're a Bond fan. Anyone who says they're not a James Bond fan is either a Puritan or a liar. Actually, that's a quote worthy of Fleming himself. I'm glad that this is being recorded. We can copyright that.
My childhood was actually...
I mean, when you were a child, without getting political about this, were the big, bad, red communists still around and very much holding some sort of influence in your country?
Well, it's a typical Western view. It's a very typical Western view. So.
Well, I mean, Bond traditionally fought those guys. Did you ever have any encounters with Bond villain types? Were you ever stopped at a border? Did you ever have like dogs?
I think all the Eastern Bloc people were watching James Bond as well. The same enthusiasm as the British.
We digress. What I'm saying is, Bond is as much a part of you and your very scientific, clinical, business-like frame of mind as it is in my kind of fantastical, romantic mindset. Bond is everywhere. Bond is pervasive, and he's a part of all of our upbringings. But what's interesting about it is that, okay, past 50 years, Bond's always been there. But you take any given decade, and the technology on display is different. And indeed, Bond's reaction to it is different. So, I suppose technically, I mean, my Bond, every Bond apparently has their own Bond. For me, it's Timothy Dalton, partly because I met him when I was about 8 years old. I went to see him in a play, and he was a gentleman, he was very helpful. But Roger Moore is
Sean Connery.
You're going to go with Sean Connery. Roger Moore's yours and our generation, though, isn't he? I mean,
well, yeah, Roger Moore is more of my generation, for sure.
Well, Roger's Bond, the technology is science fiction stuff. By the way, that's no slight on Roger Moore. I think he's a fantastic Bond, and contrary to popular belief as well, he's not just a joker. His Bond can be very brutal and very competent. Look at For Your Eyes Only and stuff. But Moonraker goes into space. Spy Who Loved Me, there is an underwater car. There's a car that can actually submerge and survive. And Mount Golden Gun, there's a flying car, although it's owned by the bad guy, not by him. My question there, I suppose, would be, of the Roger Moore tech, that sort of underwater car versus flying car, which is more possible? Are either of those possible at all?
Well, yeah, probably, yeah. Any of them, or both are.
Both of them. So could we have an underwater flying
possible
car?
to build in some way. However, yeah, there are safety considerations. So yeah, I'm not sure I would want to sit in any of them.
I think what you're implying there is that you wouldn't want a civilian.
You have to think about your environment really, because yeah, if you want to, for instance, fly those cars in cities or above cities, well, it's kind of a danger factor.
So what you're implying there is that the technology for making those things is not science fiction. It's not even pseudoscience. Potentially it's science fact.
You could merge a tiny airplane and the car, but then, well...
but the fact that it's possible doesn't mean it should happen.
Must have an explanation why people are not doing it.
Well, my explanation at a common sense level, at a non-science level, would simply be danger. Civilians are civilians, not the military. Civilians are dangerous enough behind cars, just at the wheel on the ground. People who are uninsured, people who break speed limits, people who lose their attention or whatever it is. You have those things falling out of the sky and crashing above us. That's not a science fiction reality that I'd want, even if it were possible. So I think that there's a dimension which, even if that tech were available and accessible, I think it's very much in our interest that we don't make progress in that direction. And I think it's better left in the realms of a one-off clip in a James Bond movie from Bond's perhaps more sci-fi era. But it's not just the Roger Moore era that has these developments. The Pierce Brosnan era. Now, Brosnan, very nice guy, very competent all-rounder, a good actor. And he had a very successful run as Bond for about 7 years. And he is unfortunately tarnished with the final movie that does veer into science fiction and the technology used. Or so people think. They define the film Die Another Day with an invisible car. It's a split-second moment in the movie. I mean, it has a maximum of 3 scenes. And in addition to that, I'd add, it's not invisible. What it is, I mean, they call it loosely invisible. But really, it's about 3-dimensional cameras projecting an image. And yes, it's probably not as well directed or as visualized as it perhaps should have been, and perhaps to blend in with the Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter zeitgeist of the time. Bond has to keep up with those sorts of things. The Matrix, Star Wars, etc., all very big at the time. They were trying to make it have a sci-fi sheen, but the actual principle of military-grade, primitive invisibility using projected cameras, I would say that's not just possible, it's probable. I'd say that's not pseudoscience or science fiction, I'd say it's science fact. And I would also put it to you, Robert, that the Bond fans who go on about that being the nadir of the Bond films really are, well, frankly, wrong. What do you say to that?
That's always been a dream of the military to cloak, all equipment.
Yeah.
It's it's a known fact that actually they are working on it.
Yeah.
However, well, we don't know, or at least I don't know about any.
Just for the record, Robert is now touching his nose, winking, and that's sort of, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you sort of a way. I have to tell you, Robert, that actually, I mean, just not that I'm saying that the first thing you Google is accurate, but I mean, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that would indicate that the military have looked at these things. And indeed, the writers of Die Another Day at the time, retrospective sort of defended themselves and said, look, we wanted it to look primitive. We didn't want it to look space age and so on. But then, of course, Bond evolves like anything. And with, I think, the advent of the Bourne movies, which were very low-tech and very basic, Bond himself gets rebooted in the Daniel Craig era, Casino Royale 2006 through to the present day, with Skyfall in 2012, which broke box office records, £1 billion worldwide. And now, this year, we get Spectre, which apparently will find Bond facing off against his old school nemesis Blofeld. There are certainly snow scenes being shot at the moment. And I suppose if there's one thing that defines the Daniel Craig ethos of Bond, the era, is that it's actually quite low-tech. They've deliberately gone for a retro vibe. Certainly the way that Sam Mendes leaves Skyfall at the end of that episode is he goes into a wood-panelled, very traditional-looking office building. There are no Tony Stark style minimalist three-dimensional screens. It's very old school stuff, and yet that is ostensibly the modern Bond, the Bond of today. I would also add that it's got Leia Seydoux in the next one, which in and of itself, however good or bad the technology, makes it worth watching. But on that note, Robert, I mean, is there any element of technological design where the designers, be it for fashion or function, deliberately go retro? I mean, would you design something that deliberately takes a step back in terms of how it looks or feels? Or is that just a production design thing? Is that strictly, once again, a pseudoscience, science fiction thing where they use a sort of a used future feel, you know, the kind of Blade Runners of this world? Or is there actually some merit sometimes in deliberately taking a step back and making something look like it's from the past rather than like it's a step into the future?
I honestly have no idea on this.
All right, well, that's one for the readers stroke listeners. Is there any connection between aesthetics and science? Okay, I'll make it more direct. Let me give you an example. Reddit. Reddit is the bane of my existence at the moment because as we try to build a website and a magazine, one of the things that we have to use is Reddit. I prefer Facebook, Twitter, etc. They're faster. You don't need, a degree in cloak and dagger style industrial espionage to access the various threads. And yet, you go onto Reddit and it looks like something from BBC Visual Basic. Why have they done that? Why would they...
so you mean functionality, rather?
Yeah, but I mean, even functionality has to look the part. It's got to look good, hasn't it?
Well, that's not always the case. Well, if you check, for instance, space exploration, well, the design is definitely not really a factor.
Mm-hmm.
But everything has to work properly and function. Sometimes the functional need, the natural actually design of equipment turns into quite fancy, really futuristic.
Mm-hmm. So one of the marks of it being pseudoscience or sci-fi, as they call it, is that it's going to look good. And the reality, unfortunately, is that science fact doesn't always look good. Realism is not beautiful.
Cool, really, to look good. But well, it depends on how you define, really.
Okay, well, that brings us in very...
Looks good. I mean, even nature easily delivers various...
Nature can be ugly or beautiful, you mean?
Yeah, marvels, visuals which are really not even easy to reproduce by us as humans.
Right. Okay. Well, that brings us very neatly into our final franchise du jour, Star Wars. Now, the most downloaded, viewed, hitted, whatever, poked, etc. trailer of all time is for The Force Awakens. Force Awakens is episode 7 in a franchise that started in 1977. Now, it starts with George Lucas, who, as a filmmaker, was interested in two things. Number one, he wanted to tell old-school fairy tale stories for a generation that he felt had lost its innocence in the midst of Vietnam, Watergate, and so on. But second, he wanted to invent a new technology that would make that possible. So to unite this very primitive storytelling with a very futuristic form of filmmaking. And what's remarkable, if you go back and you look at 1977's Star Wars, is that they have invented a new language in cinema with that movie. They're not just using tools, they're inventing tools. And they are inventing it, ironically enough, not to create this kind of shiny, minimalist, boiler suit wearing kind of, aesthetically pleasing future, but what we call a used future, which is still very much in vogue. I mean, Lord of the Rings use it. Peter Jackson acknowledges his debt to Lucas there. Blade Runner, to some extent, has that used future look where, yes, it's futuristic, but at the same time, the technologies that are being used, that are on display, look like they're coming from things that have collapsed, or in some post-apocalyptic way, they've broken down engines and so on. So Star Wars sort of brings those two things together, in that the technology invented for the movie itself is the future, but what it's depicting is not futuristic. It looks old school, traditional. It just happens to be set in space. Would you agree that Star Wars reinvented the language of cinema?
Yes, I definitely agree.
And my question then would be, Lucas gets criticized for going far too overboard with his computer effects when he did a second trilogy. As a scientist, do you like looking at computer effects versus practical ones? I mean, which do you prefer?
Well, I'm not sure you're asking the right person, because, well, one of my active research areas is visual computing.
Right. So when you're developing a computer game, as you do, you've developed computer games.
I did some.
Okay, well, do those
as well.
When you're developing the visuals for those, do you want just something that looks like it's pure imagination, visual on a computer, or do you want some reality to it that's got a texture?
It's the holy grail of visual computing, actually, to completely mimic actually reality.
Yeah.
The thing is that though CGI is already delivering spectacular results, actually it's still not on the level of reality, and somehow the movie fans and actually everyone, simply human perception can feel that's still well, not completely right.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very close, but still not complete.
Well, what's interesting there is that J.J. Abrams, who's taken over the reins as director, I think George Lucas still has some sort of creative consultancy on him, but this new one is directed by Abrams, and Abrams has he's reactivated the model shops at Lucasfilm, and in cooperation with Disney in his own Bad Robot production. So he clearly feels that yes, it needs some CGI, but you also need that human dimension. You need clay models, you need puppetry, and those are a science in themselves. The fact that they're slightly more primitive in their presentation or their division doesn't mean that the impact is any less emotionally, I suppose, dramatic for the audience. And I think what's interesting even there is that the people analysing the trailer, generally speaking, they've not been analysing the special effects. They're analysing what we call the verisimilitude. So, for example, there's a lightsaber in the new one which has a crossguard on it. Now, science fiction or science fact, or whatever realm you're in, you have to have a logic, an internal cohesion. And the only criticism that I've been able to discover from a trailer that's already much loved and much downloaded, etc., is the fact that crossguard lightsaber would cut off the hand of whichever Jedi Master, be he good or evil. I'm assuming evil because it's red. He'd probably hurt himself at best as he's moving that. Have you seen it? You know the crossguard, like he opened it.
Yeah, I saw the trailer. Well, if I was one of them, probably I would.
Yeah,
I would too.
So you don't think that's going to work?
It looks dangerous.
It looks dangerous, yeah. I mean, I get the double-bladed one, which defined the prequels, which was awesomely cool and brilliant. I think they're simply trying to mimic that and the impact of that, and I think there was no need for that. I'm sure they may explain it in storytelling terms. Indeed, there are a number of Star Wars fans out there in some galaxy not so far away who have already answered the verisimilitude problems there. But it's a problem. I think even in the realm of science fiction and fantasy, you have to have an internal logic. Would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely, actually. That makes fiction more believable, or at least plausible, if it has a logic. So it has to have a system. Otherwise, it's just nonsense.
I mean, one of the common criticisms of any science fictional fantasy piece is where they use what's called Deus ex machina to resolve the predicament that the heroes are in. Another one which is connected to Star Wars, Indiana Jones, the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's just this, they open the Ark and the Nazis are wiped out and so on. Fantastic, except that it means that all of Indiana Jones's efforts during that movie are for nothing, because the outcome is unchanged by the fact that there's just this one big button, basically, that just wipes something out. Doctor Who as well, the Russell T Davies era, which I'm very fond of, but I suppose has been maybe superseded or out of date now, but they frequently would rely on, if I just press this big red button thing, and a lot of people are very opposed to that, but I think it's a storytelling measure that many a writer would resort to. So as we wrap up, of the three, Star Wars, Bond, and Iron Man, or rather the Avengers, Age of Ultron, which of the three are you looking forward most to this year? They've all got an episode coming out. Age of Ultron sees Tony Stark face off against his own creation, an AI. And AI, of course, at a science level, has been forecast to be our destruction. Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk, both very worried about that. So it feels relevant, even though it's sci-fi fantasy. Star Wars, of course, you have the sentimental dimension. It's this lifelong childhood property that we all feel very close to. It also sees the return of Harrison Ford as Han Solo.
It's not there yet.
AI is not going to destroy us.
It's a bit early too. I don't know, actually. I think nobody does.
So the AI presence in the Avengers Age of Ultron doesn't make it more... Yet. Are you looking forward to that most because it feels the most scientific, or...? Which of the three? Go on. Put your money where your mouth is.
Actually, no movies have a strong science background, to be honest.
Oh, don't spoil. You've just undermined the whole podcast, Robert. Of the three, okay, let's forget science for a second. At a purely entertainment, pseudoscience
level, I would say the Avengers.
Right. And that would be your affinity with Stark, maybe. We like him as a character. We like to see him. And, of course, he gets to team up with Thor and Captain America and Hulk, and there's all that kind of interplay. I do hope they bring back Pepper Potts, at least for a cameo.
Thor that's probably the exception.
Yes, Thor is where it gets into proper fantasy, and of course they're going. Marvel will go the whole route soon because they're going to bring full-on magic. They have this character called Doctor Strange, played by
Hulk is really too, actually, from the science perspective.
Well, so you're going to go with Age of Ultron. What about Star Wars? Looking forward to that? Will you go and see that?
Absolutely, yes. Of course, I'm curious.
Are you curious? Were you a fan of Han Solo? Han Solo will be coming back. I mean, all kids, all boys, I think, liked him as a character.
Everybody loves Star Wars.
Han Solo and Tony Stark. Han Solo and Tony Stark have something in common in the sense that they're both scientifically literate. I mean, there's every implication that Han Solo is a bit of a chancer, but there's also the implication that he's an advanced pilot in that particular, obviously fictional universe. He's someone who can build things, put them together, but he's still a rogue and an adventurer rather than a sort of a geeky character that one can't root for. He's certainly not as over-earnest as Luke Skywalker. And of course, Tony Stark, who notably changes a bit during the movies, but is ultimately still as roguishly irreverent and witty as ever. Do you think there's any parallel there? Do you?
That's an interesting question. Well, I've never looked at Han Solo and Tony Stark earlier like that.
Well, it only just came to my mind, to be honest.
That's really interesting.
They both lend charisma to science.
In some sense, they are similar.
Yeah.
And even if we consider the fact that actually all the tech of Star Wars, of the Star Wars world, is actually far more developed and far more in the future, basically, than Tony Stark's contemporary tech, with little tweaks and tidy-ups here and there.
I mean, one of the things we talked about was aging.
Solo could easily outperform.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned, mortality and aging were mentioned in one of our...
It's probably, it's far better about tech stuff than...
Well, we talked about mortality and aging in one of our articles. There's a lot of bitching every time Harrison Ford revisits a part. He's damned if he doesn't, he's damned if he doesn't. If he doesn't play Han Solo or Indiana Jones again, people feel that their childhood's been taken away from them. If he does do it, they feel their childhood's been taken away from them. I'm actually looking forward to seeing him play Han Solo. I don't think age is any barrier to it. Han Solo is not a character who depends on being young or able to run around and jump about. Yes, he did all those things, but he's entertaining as a sideline character as well as the voice of the audience. He's a guy who literally just has to sit at his ship and say a few funny lines, which Harrison Ford can still do. He can still go, hey, it's me thing, and he can sort of punch it, Chewie, and stuff like that. That's what he has to do. It doesn't have to be tremendously active in a physical sense. Although we have looked at some of the anti-aging processes, perhaps, in one of our articles. Perhaps Harrison Ford can check into what is universe and throw in his views. But and what about Bond? Will you be lining up to see Spectre in November?
I will do, definitely.
Yes, but you're not quite as excited.
I'm going to watch all three.
We'll do a What is Universe film fest.
Yeah, probably Bond is the less exciting for me.
Oh well, for me, it's well, no, I'm the reverse.
That's only me.
Well, for me, it's reverse. I mean, because I'm a Bond guy, and
I know.
Leia Seydoux in it, and like I said, I'd pay to read her Watch the Phone book. So quite frankly, I'm sold already. In fact, I'm already queuing mentally for that film. But I have resisted the urge to look at any spoilers online, all of which apparently are available on that cursed thing, Reddit. But you move on. Anyway, thanks for listening. I think that brings us to the end. Please do keep posting, and please do keep boosting these conversations. In the next few weeks, what we're aiming to do is make the website a lot more interactive. Robert, I think you call it gamification. Is that right?
Absolutely, that's the right definition.
Quizzes and that sort of thing, winning T-shirts, mugs. Facebook remains, for me, certainly the central hub in terms of where things start, but you'll see a lot more activity on Twitter. Yes, our beloved Reddit as well. Pinterest, etc., etc., and of course, with this new step forward, not too many platforms, but enough to make us a presence. And we thank you very much for your interaction, for your support, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to what will either be the first and the last, or the first of many. And until the next time, keep reading, keep thinking, and keep experimenting. Take care. Bye.